much for joining me today, Kami. I really appreciate it. Why don't we start off with you telling us a little bit about your journey with health and success?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Michelle, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here with you. And I think it's really important for us to really look at success and health together. And because, you see a lot of people that will go out there and they will actually dive into success and they'll forget their health. And
Yeah.
I think, I've definitely over the course of my lifetime have fallen into that trap where, you know, I was working, I was driving, I was doing all the things. I can go back to my corporate days and I know that I was getting sick a lot in my last year of being in the corporate world. And even as an entrepreneur, I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years. And there's been times where I've caught myself not taking fully care of myself. So I
It
think,
happens all the time. It
yeah,
happens all.
I think it's spot on that question. And I think that when I look at my big transformation, when I really looked at my health, it was probably about 5 years ago where I really started. Well, it's actually a little bit more than that. I can go back. I lost my sister in 2018, and um, I lost her to cancer, and so there was like this awakening of, you know, you know, we can, I'm living, right? I'm living and I need to take care of myself. And I think that's really
Yeah,
an important thing. So that moment was um, a time where I really started looking at my health in a bigger way. And then, we got into 2020 and all the things that happened in 2020. And I was like, how do we take care of ourselves through the mix of all of that? I've been growing this business for 15 years. And so, as I mentioned, I've had like moments where, I was very focused on the success of the business and I forgot about the wellness of me in the mix of it. And it doesn't serve me, right? I mean, it's like we can't show up in our brightest lights when we are in this space of leading and taking others on a journey and helping uplift others. We have to be in our healthiest state. We have to take care of this wonderful vessel of who we are. And
absolutely.
yeah,
It's foundational.
yeah. And I think I started with some Ayurvedic work. I had an Ayurvedic coach, and that was some really good lessons in the mix of that.
Can
I
you
was
explain to the listeners what that is exactly?
sure it was. I think it's an ancient Chinese way of being, I would say, and so it's how do we show up in life? How do we eat things that are really good for our bodies, and like what kinds of foods does our body want, what kind of self-care do we need to take? So that was some early things that I went on. I was doing some Whole 30 things at one point. Again, it was just starting to discover what did my body react to and respond to, what did it like, what did it not like. And then at some point, I went down the pathway of working with a functional nutritionist. And I think that's where I really got even more deeply into knowing what does my body need, right? What does I learned that, my body did not like dairy. My body did not like gluten. There's these things that my body just really didn't like. And so I learned how to let go of things like that, and not in a restrictive way, but more of a nourishing way, and like what really nourished my body.
Yeah,
And that was a
there's a
big aha.
difference.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a difference between self-love and discipline and restriction and doing it out of self-hate,
totally,
right?
totally. And it was one of those things that when I really looked at how I approached it, right? Like I would say I get to go to yoga versus I have to go to yoga. Or I get to choose the foods that that my body loves, that makes me feel good. That was a
Hmm.
big shift for me. So it was some language that I used that was that sort of, so it was all of that happening. So my business was growing, and my visibility was growing. I was doing all the right things in my business. And there was a point where it was like, okay, taking care of me alongside of that is just as important. And that was my big kind of awakening in that space, if you will.
Yeah, I love that. I want to ask you about your corporate days
Hmm.
and what your lifestyle looked like then,
Oh
whether that
gosh.
be, diet, exercise, but also mindset. What
Yeah.
was the priorities when you were working corporate?
Oh, I was working long, long hours. I was working up to 80 hours a week at some points.
Oh my God.
I was traveling around the world. I had teams. I was a VP of marketing and branding for a large multinational organization. And so I had teams in all corners of the world. So I was constantly going to another, country to be with my team. And it was crazy. It was a very crazy time in my life. And, in that last year, every time I'd get on a plane, I'd end up catching a cold. And that was a lot of time because I was getting on a plane a lot.
Yeah.
So I was always coming up down with some sort of a bug, and I was exhausted. And when I left the corporate world, I didn't even realize how burnt out I was. We were talking about nervous system, which is a newer term for me. I didn't talk about nervous system until probably 2, 3 years ago. That wasn't something that I even thought about. But I know looking back at that time, I know my nervous system was fried.
Yeah.
And um and it I came out of that, and people were like, just take a break. And I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to go find my next thing. And I left in June of 2008. And there was this time of really thinking, okay, I'll just take a month. I'll take 1 month to pause.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my father passed away like a month after I had lost my job.
Mm.
And so I took more time. And then it was the fall of 2008. And, the economy changed, of course.
Right.
And at that point, and I always say it was the best blessing was, one, I got laid off in 2000. And the second one, it was I got laid off in 2008 because there wasn't more VP of marketing jobs around at that time. So I was
Mhm.
literally forced to take it was about a 17-month break between when I left to when I actually decided I was going to go start a business. And
It's
that was the best
interesting
gift.
how, yeah, it's interesting. I'll say this, and maybe it seems a bit frou-frou, but it's interesting how the universe
Oh,
puts
totally.
things in your way to
Definitely. I
say,
mean,
you need to slow down.
nothing frou-frou about it. I totally believe it with all of my heart and being. It's that the universe got in and said, yeah, no, you're not going back to what you were doing. We've got other plans for you, and you have to take a break.
Yes.
And so I walked through the woods. I did hiking. I got together with friends and had lunch. I did things with my family. I slowed
Yeah.
down. I watched the baby birds in the barn, right? I mean, it was just like all of the things that I got to do in those 17 months was just something I had lost touch with.
The
And
things that nourished your soul.
totally, totally. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
had written a poem actually when my dad died that was a poem of what my dad taught me. And one of the things, I mean, and so as I read that, and as I wrote that poem, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing all these things that he taught me that were so intimately a part of who I was. And
Yeah.
so it was a big awakening for me in that time period. And so I'm always forever grateful that one, I had the time and space to do that. I had the ability to be able to take that kind of time and space. Um, it-
Yeah.
and it opened up the door to becoming an entrepreneur. And that was where, as an entrepreneur or as a corporate person, I didn't have a spiritual bone in my body, right? That just was not who I was. And when I took that time in that space, I was reconnecting back into nature. I was reconnecting back with my horses and things that were just really critical and important to me in my soul. And I found my own kind of spiritual path through that, right? So, like, who am I? What am I meant to be doing? And, what is this journey that I'm on, and where am I going? And, so many questions that were there. And it was such a beautiful unfolding of becoming who I am, the person that
That's
I had
so
lost.
powerful.
Yeah.
That's so powerful. And that version that you have lost, and I know not everybody has the privilege or the ability to shift like that.
Yeah.
You know, but how important has that been to not only your success, like getting aligned with what you're doing now?
Yeah.
How important has that been to your success, to your health, to
Everything.
where
It's
you are
everything.
now?
And it's even about, what my purpose was, right? Because how I was able to make an impact as, a VP of marketing branding for a large multinational company, I was making the difference in the bottom of a company that was growing really rapidly, right?
Mhm.
Um, and but it wasn't like really, and I could make an impact on my team members and that sort of thing. But the impact that I've been able to make as a leader, as an entrepreneur, helping women raise up their voices and their visibility and, build their companies in a way that is really, helping them build companies that are soul driven as well. And then also to succeed in the ripple effect that in the work that they're doing, putting their work out into the world, that becomes a big ripple effect, right? It's like I think of all the women I've been able to help, and then they go help the people they're helping. And
Yes.
it's where you really start to say, this is leaving legacy.
Yes.
And I would have never gotten there had I not, one, shifted how I was taking care of myself. And of course, we learn the lesson over and over again.
Yes. Until you actually really learn it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's, I think that's the difference it was really able to make for me is I love the work that I get to do today.
That's incredible. Now we've shifted from corporate Cami to entrepreneur Cami.
Hmm.
Now, lots of corporate women fall into this burnout state, and most high performing women don't even recognize it as burnout. They
Yeah.
just recognize it as like the next challenge, like
You
keep
don't.
pushing, right?
You don't
But
recognize that.
entrepreneurs, no. But entrepreneurs, same, or sometimes even worse or
Yeah.
deeper
Yeah.
because there's more meaning behind what they're doing now and maybe more pressure.
Hmm.
So when you first started your business, I'm sure it
Yeah.
looked different than it does today, but where were you in terms of like hustle and that same hard worker that
Yeah.
was corporate Cami? Where were
Yeah.
you when you first started that? Did all of those habits come back even though you had gone on this spiritual journey?
I think I've gone through evolutions, if you will, like where I'm really grounded and deeply into this state of being. And I was, especially when I first started my company, I was just so grounded after taking that time. And, I found my way into the work that I did, coaching work through the horses, because I'm an equine guided coach as well, or equine assisted coach. So the horses are what took me into the world of coaching, deep inner work that helps you discover, what your what's next, if you will, and tap into who you are. So that really kept me grounded very deeply. And, as I was starting my business, I did a lot of my coaching out in nature. I just like, I was living in that kind of a space. And then as my business started to grow and I started to reach more people who weren't necessarily in my state, but they were across the nation or in different parts of the world. And when I, when I started to do that, it's like, you're in that next evolution of your business. It's like, okay, I'm doing this. And so you can catch yourself falling back into, old habits. Old habits really do. I mean, I think one thing is like I used to get up in the corporate world at like 5:30 to do meetings because I had a team in the UK. And I would do a meeting with them I'd be on a call with them at 5:30 in the morning. And
Oh
that
my
was an
God.
old habit that I had to really, really break and change up. Like, okay, no, I want to do my mornings different. I want time for me in the morning. I want time to meditate. I want time to walk. I want to, I want that kind of thing. So, like, whatever my morning ritual is at any given point, I think is a really important thing for me. It's like, I don't do meetings generally before 10 o'clock in the morning because I want that space for myself to start
Yes.
differently. Um, but I'm one of those people that, like, you look at like kind of the habits that we have incorporated over the years, the habits that just come very naturally and organically. When I think of like my money stories are, you work hard for money, right? I mean, so that's like working to change that story up. And so I can very naturally fall back into bad habits. So I have to
Me too.
really watch what I do to like notice if I'm starting to, get into a high edge pathway. They're like, wait a minute, I'm noticing this. I need to make sure that I'm, taking breaks during the day and breathing and, you know, things like that.
Food,
Food, right?
making sure you're eating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I've gotten much, much better at that. But, there's seasons in my business that I can look back and go, oh, you let too much of that slip back in.
Yeah.
So I have to be really cognizant.
Yeah. In life, mindfulness
Yeah,
is a practice,
totally.
right?
Right. Exactly.
Right. Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm the same. I find that things like money mindset, I
Hmm.
can find myself slipping back into old habits
Yep.
um, in that way. Like a contract is coming up for renewal, and then it starts like fear starts to creep in, or that kind of thing. Instead of just
Yeah.
being like, no, you know what? I know that what I'm doing is making an impact on this, and what, regardless of the result, it's opening up more capacity in my
Yeah.
business. Like it's almost just a knowing and trusting and coaching yourself through some of those slip backs
Yeah. Totally.
to pull yourself back into alignment.
Yeah, another one that I work with is time, right? It's just like, so like how we move through time, the energy of time. And
Hmm.
are we living in a time scarcity where like we're hopping between meetings that, it's like I'm rushed between one meeting to another meeting to the end of the day, rushing into making dinner or what, whatever that looks like. Or am I making time prosperity where I'm slowing down and moving between different things that I'm doing at a different pace, right? And like breathing in between them. And I often tell a story of time practicing time prosperity going to the airport. Um,
That's a
y-
great one.
yeah, because it's like, when we're going to the airport, we're like where we have to be. And if you approach going to the airport with I've got plenty of space and time here. I'm not rushed. There's no reason I need to, feel like I'm rushing from one thing to another, from the gate, from the security to the gate to there's plenty of space and time here. And if you approach a day of travel that way, it'll change everything how you feel at the end of the day.
You're absolutely right. I love time prosperity. Let's touch on wealth prosperity.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
So
Yeah.
you teach women about time prosperity and wealth prosperity. Tell me what that means to you in that same way.
Yeah, and it's about setting your business up so that you've got the right packaging, the right pricing that's helping you grow your business in a right way. Um, Sorry, my dog's bark.
Mhm.
He's got
No worries.
sorry, sorry. You might have to cut that part. Let me start that over. He gets these little coughs. So if he does it again, I'll take him out of here so he doesn't.
I couldn't actually hear it, so
Oh,
it's
you
fine.
couldn't. Okay.
No.
Okay. Um, So wealth prosperity, I look at it through the lens of how we set up our businesses so that we do have time on our white space for us, right? We've got white space. And so it's setting up the right packaging, the right pricing, the right business model that enables us to grow and scale our businesses. And it's not so that we're filling every corner of our calendar up. We're actually leaving white space on our calendar so we can do our big picture thinking. We can do we can do our work with our clients. We can do our marketing, but we've got space to do that. And our
Mhm.
business model is set up so that with the right packaging and the right pricing, so that we're not overworking. It's a scalable business model. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really big part of that. Um, and I think you hit on the other side of wealth prosperity is the mindset. And I think it's just something that we all have to work with. I work with my clients on this all the time. It's like, you know, their business can be doing great, fantastic. And they won't even recognize the how great it is doing because they're really not living in the wealth prosperity of like, oh my gosh, there's an abundant amount of dollars coming through the door. Let's really acknowledge that and recognize the wins that are happening. And
Yeah, that's
and
something I learned in JBA for sure
yeah,
is recognizing those small wins. When you put them together, you're like, oh, like I'm there,
yeah,
I've done it, I'm
totally.
doing it. But you can definitely get stuck in the mindset of that circular thinking of not enough. It's
Yeah.
not enough, or I'm not doing good enough, or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And it's if we can just start to acknowledge that, our businesses are evolving and growing, and being an entrepreneur is never a straight line, and revenue is never a straight line. Um, and so learning to really be in that space of the ups and downs, but knowing that your business is growing and evolving that way.
I mean, I feel like you can really draw that parallel to healing as well.
Yeah,
Your health
totally.
is never a straight line. It's up and down, and ideally what you want. And even in my case, like being a practitioner in the functional health world,
Hmm.
my health is up and down, and I'll be entering perimenopause in the next, hopefully 10 years, but who knows how close it actually is. But as long as you're always moving up, and as long as you're always being mindful, and as long as you're always knowing that you're growing, and doing good for yourself,
Yeah, I
you are
totally
succeeding.
I can totally see that. And it's interesting because, like I said, I've been working. So I worked with a functional nutritionist for 2.5 years. And I've just noticed just recently, I'm like, where did this extra weight come on? I was like going to speak last week and I was putting on some clothes and I'm like, where did this weight come from that had come off? And so they're like little habits. Like, what have I been doing differently? Oh, I've had a few more glasses of wine, or, you know, so it's like just knowing the little things. And it's like, okay, now wait a minute. Let's kind of reground back to what's good for my body and what choices am I making right now? And, what can I bring back into my, how I'm nourishing myself, how I'm moving, things that I know, but can slip.
Totally
Yeah.
easy when there's
Yeah.
a time of stress, or when there's a time of, I mean, can I ask about your sister? She
Yeah,
passed away.
totally.
Was there a time after that things slipped for you in your taking care of yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
Where it was,
Yeah.
because you're like, and even, yeah, it's just, it's when you're taking care of somebody, like leading up to, when I was helping take care of her, it's like that was, things slipped for me as well. Right. So it's, I think that we, like you said, we go up and down, we have these different times in our lives that different seasons, if you will,
Yes.
that we're not fully tuned into to what our needs are. And that pause again, there's that pause, is so important to say, oh, wait a minute, what am I doing? What am I noticing here right now?
Yeah. Yeah. That reflection, it's so necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
and for me, it's not even the weight piece of it. I don't really get too hung up on weight. It's how I feel.
for
And
sure.
so, like when I was just talking about, I'm trying on some clothes and I notice things feel a little tighter. That's a sign, but it's also the sign of, do I feel healthiest right now?
Right.
And that to me is, so when I'm making choices, it's to me, it's like, it's not me chasing a number on a scale. It's more of am I feeling my best? Am I
Mhm.
really shining my brightest? And acknowledging, okay, oh, wait a minute, there's something I can be doing here.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. I have two questions.
Sure.
One, and you can tell me if you don't want to go down this path and we can edit this out. But you did tell me last week that you at some point were diagnosed with Hashimoto's.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'll definitely talk about
So,
Hashimoto's.
okay. So where in your journey were you diagnosed,
Mhm.
and what was going on in your world in terms of your business at that point?
So I was diagnosed almost 3 years ago. Um,
Okay.
and my business was on a high trajectory of growth. So it had really gone up in the last, probably the year prior, which is a really interesting perspective. I don't think I've ever put that together. Um, I had thyroid cancer when I was 15. So I've been on thyroid medicine, my whole life. basically. Um, and I had, my numbers have always been pretty stable, and that they're not, they've not been all over the place. They've been pretty stable over the years, but they've
Mhm.
been off. I could tell they were off leading up to that point. Although I'd go to the doctors and they were still telling me the story of, they look pretty good. We might tweak it a little bit, but they look pretty good. And when I went to the doctor that summer 3 years ago, I was like, yeah, but I just put 20 pounds on in like 2 months. This is not normal. This is not
Yes.
normal. And the doctor's like, well, your numbers are okay. So it's not, it must not be anything related to your thyroid. I'm like, who puts on 20 pounds in 2 months? You just don't. There's something else going on there. And so
Also,
that's,
he was probably checking your T4, which is
yep,
the levels that we're giving you in terms of the synthetic hormone
yep,
for your thyroid, which if you're on thyroid medication would be
yeah,
ideally regular. They weren't checking for your antibodies, I'm
no,
sure.
but oh, they definitely weren't. They definitely were not. And so when I um, decided to go work with a functional nutritionist that summer, instantly she discovered, she's, oh, your antibodies are like way off the charts here. And so hold on, let me let him out. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry. He's got this allergy going on. Um, okay. So the antibodies were way off the charts. And she was like, so we started addressing that. And interestingly enough, I went back to that same doctor, and she's, oh, that's just hooey. That's just, we don't have anything to work off of those numbers. You could have had those same numbers your whole life, and we just don't know because we've never taken those numbers before. I'm like, why haven't you ever taken those numbers? Right. I mean, it was just, and so I changed Western doctors after that, because I'm just like, I need somebody who's going to work with a functional nutritionist and be able to collaborate and look at my whole health versus having this siloed view of how somebody was treating me. So, and I've
Yeah.
run into that a couple of times. It's like, even I went to an endocrinologist about probably a year ago, and it was an endocrinologist that my functional nutritionist had actually recommended.
Mm.
She no longer recommends her because it was such a bad experience. She's like, well, we study different things, and so we're never going to see eye to eye on this stuff. And
Yeah.
I was really, the doctor that I have found now, the Western doctor that I have now, works with my functional nutritionist, and we work together on it. And that's really what we need.
That's very much what we need. I wish that I could tell you that, feeling dismissed or not feeling like the doctor had actually dug deep enough, or whether it's a specialty in an endocrinologist or just your GP. I wish that I could tell you that that story is unique, but I come
Yeah.
up like 100% of the women that I work with are telling me the exact same story. And I have my own story in it as
Yeah.
well, which is
Yeah.
so sad.
Yeah. Totally. Totally.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this connection. I'm sure your functional nutritionist told you this, but Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism is often linked and caused by high chronic stress and burnout.
And that makes sense to me. Yeah, it totally
Yeah.
makes sense to me, because it's, and so even, just leading up to that time period, it was, we've been coming off of COVID. Had been a lot of,
Yes.
so yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
then obviously for a lot of women, when it comes, I mean, it's also very common in perimenopause and postmenopause
Yeah.
thyroid function, just because everything starts to decline. And I mean, everything's so interconnected, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's I will say common, still not normal.
Yeah.
But a lot of women will accept from their doctors that, oh, you're
So
just in
true.
menopause or you're just in perimenopause.
Yeah.
So that extra 20 pounds is just what happens in
Yeah.
midlife.
Yeah.
But you said, I'm assuming you said 3 years ago you discovered Hashimoto's, and then just last week. So I assume you had lost the weight when you got it under
I
control.
did. I mean, I lost the weight like within like instantly almost. I mean, it instantly came off as soon as we started looking at it through a different lens and pulling out some foods that weren't, really working for me. My gut got happier, right? So this goes right back to our guts. It's our guts. It's such a core part of of our wellness, and that
Yes.
wasn't something that I was ever considering before. It's like, what's the wellness of my gut? And
Yes.
that was like, oh, okay, this makes so much sense that it's not, it's not a thyroid disease. It's a gut, it's autoimmune, and it's my gut being unhappy, and it's the antibodies that are attacking my thyroid. But that's just the antibodies that chose me, that were the ones that are going to attack my thyroid. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And ultimately, it's coming down to like inflammation,
exactly.
coming down to inflammation, and Hashimoto's and gluten are very connected.
Yeah.
Anybody with Hashimoto's, I would just say, just immediately, just take it out, take gluten out, figure that out, because it's just not, it's going to cause more inflammation. It's going to cause more issues with your thyroid.
And
And
I think that's an important piece, is the inflammation, because in fact, I just saw a picture of me from like 5 years ago. Probably 4 years ago is probably when it was. And my face was puffy. I, you know, it was a different level of what I look like. And I can see it, my face is thinner today than what it was 4 years ago, before I went through all of this stuff. And it wasn't like it wasn't like, it was inflammation, right? My body was holding inflammation, and you could see it in my face in that picture. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I really was kind of blown away by that, because I didn't see it then, but I could see it now.
yeah, yeah. I also want to ask you, okay, specifically inflammation, because you
Uh-huh.
can't silo inflammation. If there's
Yeah.
if there's an inflammatory response going on in your body, it's happening through your entire body.
Yeah.
And I often see women, female founders who are struggling with inflammation, struggling with burnout, struggling with energy, like everything we just spoke about.
Uh-huh.
And then as they come through that, and as they heal that, and that inflammation comes down,
Hmm.
um, I ask them questions about their creativity. I ask them questions about their curiosity. I ask them questions about what kind of energy do they have, mental energy, do
Hmm.
they have to put toward implementing new strategies in their business, or implementing new ideas, or having
Yeah.
new conversations that might benefit and help them grow, whether it's their revenue or their visibility, or insert whatever goal it is. And oftentimes they haven't connected the dots there until I start asking those questions. But if you think about brain inflammation, or if you
Totally.
think about inflammation in the gut, your body is constantly fighting,
Yeah.
and doesn't you don't have the energy. So if you take away that inflammation, you actually build the capacity to have the creativity, the curiosity, the strategic thinking, to build the business the way you want it, or whatever that looks like. Do you have any thoughts on that, or any personal reflection on that type
Yeah.
of?
Yeah. Definitely. I can tell you that I've had like bigger ideas, and I've had like, well, one, I create more white space for myself, right? So I can actually think about bigger ideas, but I also have the capacity. I'm not exhausted. I'm not feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm drained. I'm, you know, like pulling all of my energy together to accomplish, just to serve my clients. I actually have space and time, and I feel excited to think big picture. So I think that's definitely true. And I think the other piece of it is I've stayed much healthier, like from the perspective of I've had, in the last 3 years, I've had very few colds. I've had, like, where before I was kind of catching all the stuff.
Yeah.
And, again, one of those signs that your
Yes.
body's got inflammation going on in it. And um, I rarely get colds anymore. So,
Incredible.
and I can be around people that have them, and I feel like I'm healthier. My it's weller. It's weller. Is that a word? More well. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, no,
so
that's good.
yeah, I think both sides of that is, that I have more energy because um I I feel better.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that really rings true for me personally is, I've had many business coaches in the past.
Hmm.
Um, and during the time where I was most unwell, I was not actually able to receive their advice in a
Mm,
way that felt realistic to implement. So
interesting.
whether good or bad advice,
Yeah.
it just I was not able to like really kind of hunker down and actually implement into my business. Um, and then as I healed, and then, in the business coaching that I'm in now, I'm like
Yeah.
truly ready.
Yeah.
And like the implementation feels effortless when at
Yeah.
one point, getting an email once a day was like a complete dread and a chore. And I had
Right.
to like drag myself to do it. Now implementing big picture, big strategy, big ideas,
Yeah.
and long-term thinking. And I actually think now, as I'm saying this, um, when you're not healed, time prosperity, wealth prosperity, energy prosperity, um,
Mm,
you can't even you can't even get there.
yeah.
Everything is scarce.
Yeah. I love that you brought energy prosperity into the mix of us, because I think that's a big part of it. It's like, how do we energetically show up? And then when I think about, showing up on stages, bringing all of ourselves, we can't be our best if energetically we're not, uh, you know, all the cylinders working together, right? And
Exactly.
and I think that's the brightness that we can bring, is when we are well, when we're really showing up in time prosperity and wealth prosperity and energy prosperity, we have a brighter light. Now we
Yeah.
resonate on a higher vibe, and
Yes.
we've turned that dial up, and people feel that. And that's
Yes.
the magic. And that's why, I talk all the time. I'm talking to my clients about, you've got to take care of you. You've got to take care of this wonderful vessel of you. And we're all different. And I think that's the one thing, another thing that I really learned in the last few years is like, what my body needs is not what somebody else's body needs. So I'm not, it's like these diets that are like diets are,
Mm.
they're, I'm anti-diet culture, because how that person eats is going to be different than what I eat. And we just have to learn to get curious with our bodies and explore and discover and say, okay, this is when my body thrives most, when I'm
Yeah.
doing these things, when I'm nourishing it with these types of foods. And that's
Yeah.
how we find our highest vibration of how, we're shining most brightly.
Yeah. And this is what you teach women when they step on stage, is stepping into their authenticity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Stepping into themselves energetically so that
Totally.
they're maybe attracting and they are a magnet to their people.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really letting it come from within, like letting our words, letting our message come from within. And also being, and I don't like the word authentic because it just gets overused, but it's
Sure.
it's like it's like it's just being you and all of who you are, and not trying to shut off or put on masks, or try to project something. It's about being you and all of your light and all of your wellness, and bringing your message through you. And that's how people go, oh my gosh, that's what I need what that person says is talking about
Yeah.
there. And they're leaning in, right? It's like they feel you because you're
Yeah.
resonating on that high vibe.
Yes. And you can't be that person if you're being dragged down
No, exactly.
by poor gut health,
Yeah.
inflammation,
Yeah.
autoimmunity. You
Yeah.
don't have the capacity to find that within yourself
Yeah.
to allow it to shine out.
Yeah. Totally. 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 I agree with that 100%.
Amazing. And you know what? When I really think about my whole life, whether it be business or personal, it wasn't until I really dove into my health that I was then able to express better self-love, better self-respect, better boundaries. I let go of people that didn't need to be in my life. And at one point it was there was a scarcity mindset of
Hmm.
like, but I don't want to lose somebody. But then
Yeah.
I realized that it opened up the door to my people.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It does. And it's, when you open that door to your people, you're vibing on the same vibe, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, tell us about soul and strategy. Tell us about everything that you do because
Oh, thank you.
it feels so important for women to learn from other women about this alignment.
Yeah. So, I've been doing strategy my whole business career. I knew how to do strategy. I came out, I was a VP of marketing and branding. I drove strategy in the organizations that I was in. And so that was just something that I knew how to do, that very linear way of being. When
Hmm.
I left the corporate world, I had mentioned that I really did start to find this whole new side to me and a way to listen to that inner wisdom, a way to um, feel into, where am I being guided? What journey is the universe taking me on? And being curious and open to that. And so that was a big, big awakening for me when I started playing in both sides of that. And there was a point where several years into my business, I was doing a rebrand of my business and I was journaling on the question, what does my business want to be? And what came for like just clear as day in my mind was it wants to be a spirit driven business. And I was like, what? So, because when I first started my business, I didn't really talk about that, right? I was like talking about, I was talking about more linear kinds of things. And so I had this like, okay, what do I do with this? And so I started really playing with that and like just getting curious about, well, what does that even look like? What's that mean? And so then I started bringing some of the work that I was doing with myself into to my work with my clients, and it was really magical. It was really, really magical where, they would have this breakthrough that came from inside versus from like some linear approach. And I think you need both. You know, I think you need the linear approach. I think you need the more organic approach of the listening to our soul and bringing soul wisdom to the mix of it. So if you can weave those two together, I think we really align our businesses to our purpose of what we're meant to be doing, how we're meant to make an impact. My clients tend to be a lot of women who desire to make a big impact with their work. And
Hmm.
so it's, weaving both sides of that. And, I do that. I do it through, I'm always bringing like great questions to get people to go deep and start to think about things. But I have, I integrate my horses into my work. So I'm an equine assisted coach, an equine guided coach. And my clients get to experience, they get to come in for retreats with the horses. They get out of the office and they're in a space of there's there all the noise that goes on in our heads. It's like we kind of drop into a different way of being. We slow down to the pace of the horses. We listen to that inner wisdom even more deeply. The horses start engaging and interacting with us in a way that helps us tap into deeper wisdom. So that can be really magical. We do an event called Soul Speaks from the Stage, which is a speaker training where you're getting out of your head, you're really getting into your body, and you're letting your stories come from within. You're learning to speak your messages from within versus from our heads. You see the speaker bubble up here versus like dropping into and really embodying our messaging.
Yeah.
We get into somatics, all of it. It's like really, it's like as entrepreneurs, we hold so much emotion in our body. So how do we release it? How do we get through that? And how do we find ways that we're clearing out the space? This is another, part of wellness, right? It's like we're talking about energy. We can hold emotions and tension in our body. And if we can learn to recognize where we're holding something in our body. And I think it's one of my superpowers. I can be sitting in a circle of clients and I can go, okay, what's going on in your throat chakra right now? Let's talk about that. And they'll be like, oh. oh my gosh, and like this big loosening of that is where it's like, okay, let's work with that and break
Yeah.
through this. And that's where, you see the big evolutions, the big breakthroughs really happening. It's like when we can find those um those stuck places in our body and break through that.
Yes, I love that. That's also a part of my program is somatics and lots of visualization and like colors, visualizing
Ooh,
colors come through different parts of our body
yeah,
and recognizing if something feels stuck in
yeah,
that place and
yeah,
sitting with it and giving it love and really quieting the noise that's in your head
yeah,
and just feel what's happening in your body.
yeah,
And I mean, ultimately, that's nervous system stuff. That's getting you out of that fight or flight or that fawn and just like finding the real person in there.
yeah. Oh, I love that. And just touching on nervous system, because I think that like I mentioned earlier, that I didn't even know the term nervous system until, you know, 3, 4 years ago. And, and once I started discovering that, I was like, oh my gosh, why haven't I learned about this before? Right.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think that anybody that's teaching that nervous system work right now, I think it's just really important that we all learn all we can about our nervous systems.
Yes. It holds all of your trauma, it holds all of your energy, and you have to move that out. You have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love
Yeah.
that you do the work with the horses. I knew a
Yeah.
woman years ago, she was a psychotherapist, and part of her practice was bringing her patients in to work with her
Yeah.
horses.
Yeah.
And there is a wisdom and a calmness and I don't know, a trust that you can have with these giant beings that is so beautiful. And it really does help heal. And I've seen it with a
Yeah.
girlfriend of mine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's really, I mean, I always say, may I always be in awe of what happens with the horses in the arena, because I've done hundreds and hundreds of different, clients through my round pins and with my horse work with my horses, and nothing has ever been the same. It's always been different, and the horses show up for each individual person for
Yeah.
whatever it is they need. There's like,
Yeah.
they have this intuitive way of knowing, of tuning into what does this person need, and they show up for that person in a unique way, and they're like, oh my gosh, and it's really, I love that part of my work for sure.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, if you could tell a high performing, high driven female founder, female executive who is feeling disconnected from their body, I mean, maybe they don't even know they're feeling disconnected from their body. If they are disconnected from their body and they have been putting their well-being on the back burner,
Mm,
what piece of advice or a couple of pieces of advice would you give them?
yeah, first I'll say pause, because you won't recognize it until you do pause. I can go back to, my leaving the corporate world behind. I didn't know for many months that I was actually as burnout as I was. I just had no idea. In fact, I think I even refer back to it that time and go, I think I even had a bit of PTSD kind of going on in the mix of the talk about nervous system, right? Being broken.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly where I was. So I'd say pause and feel into, like, literally feel, because you've got to, if you're pausing, and it's like you need to just feel what's there for my body, and what am I noticing, and do I have big tension here, am I carrying it in my hips, and where is it that you're holding on? And
Mm-hmm.
so dive into that. I'd say eat well, find somebody that helps you, discover what your body needs. Um, don't go follow a bunch of diets, because it's not going to serve you. Your body is going to be unique and different. So find somebody that can take you on a journey that helps you discover everything unique about your body, because your body is unique and beautiful, and it needs something different than the next person needs. And
Yeah.
so work with somebody that can help you find that. And then
Yeah.
I would say really build your business in a way that gives you the space. It gives you the um, ability to have the right business model that gives you white space on your calendar, but also that time prosperity of the energetic side of time prosperity, right? Build your business in a way that that lights you up and is aligned with who you are. So, so you're listening to that soulful wisdom within, and let it help guide you. And so, put somebody around you that can help you tap into that and help you, build the kind of business that you truly fall in love with. Because if you've fallen in love with your business and you're doing work that makes an impact, you're going to shine really brightly because it's going to light you up. And if you're just like in this hustle of trying to make things happen, to force things to happen, you're not going to feel it. And you're going to dim your light because you're just burning yourself out into that. So
Yeah.
really find that alignment to who you are and the work you're meant to do, but build the business model that takes you there. And then you can get on stages, your light's going to be bright. You're going to, all day long, let's say, your visibility is your fire, right? That's what's going to get people coming to you. But you
Yeah.
got to have this foundation of taking care of you in the mix of this, then so that you can stand up in your brightest light.
Yeah. Those are powerful words, Cami. And if there's anybody who's listening to this and is like, I don't know what it means to, feel it. I don't
Yeah.
even, the pause, people tend to fill it up,
Yeah.
fill up their free time with other things and have to be
Yeah.
productive. That's not the point. And if you need the help and if you need the guidance,
Yeah.
Cami is here and she's the
Absolutely.
perfect person to help guide you to find that, to feel that, and ultimately to thrive and excel in the business world as well. Can you tell us, you have an event coming up in November. Why don't
Yep.
you tell us a little bit about that event and who's it for and what
Okay.
people can expect?
It's my 11th annual Extraordinary Women Ignite conference. So this 11th year that I'll be doing this event, and it's a conference for women entrepreneurs who are ready to raise up their voice and their visibility and be seen and be heard in their most important work. And we've, over the years, we've had, hundreds and hundreds of women come through our conferences and just they walk away and they walk into the new year with a plan. That's one thing that I will say that I think is really unique about our conference is that, they do the inner work of, where's your business guiding you and what is next for you in your business and what do you want to stand for in your messaging and your voice. But they actually walk away with a plan for making that happen in the new year. So that's why we hosted in November, because it's a really good way for people to find that grounding and walk into the new year with a solid plan. The other part of it is it's an amazing community of women entrepreneurs who support and uplift one another. I have had women come back to this. I have had women there every single 11 of the 11 years because they come back. It feeds their soul, and it's community, it's listening inside, and it's setting that path forward. So I love that I have so many repeatees coming back through, and it makes me really happy to see that, and the community that is created. Business deals get done, and they're women that really are serious about the impact that they want to make.
Incredible. And where is it?
It's in Colorado. So it's in Lakewood, Colorado this year. It's been in Golden, Colorado for all 10 years, the first 10 years. So we're in a new venue this next year. But it's in
Amazing.
just outside of Denver.
Amazing. I will make sure, please send me that link, Cami, and I'll make sure that it's in the show notes.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
when we market this, I'll make sure that is a part of it as well. That was
Thank you.
incredible conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And it's so good to know your work and what you're doing. I so believe in the kind of work that you're doing. And I'm just super thrilled to know you.
Thank you, me as well.